no one's going to go, oh, I love this new Brendon Urie single. Who's Brendon Urie? Oh, Panic at the Disco.
Yeah. I mean, if people already associate Brendon Urie with Panic, there's like there's no marketing reason to divert.
Who is in Panic at the Disco?
Yeah.
Who's in Matchbox 20?
Rob Thomas?
Yeah. Rob Thomas had a solo record.
Honestly, but I didn't even know Rob Thomas was in Matchbox 20 until this year.
Exactly, and that's because of me. We had a lot of good times in 2023. We had a lot of fun. We all did our best.
Literally.
I don't know. I mean, a lot of people always like at the end of the year, they're like, this is one of the worst years of my life, or like, next year's my year and all that shit. And I don't know. Like we want to take a little minute to like look back at something that happened over this year. So we're going to do a little bit of an in memoriam for one of the big four emo bands that broke up this year. And
out of nowhere. I
mean, yes-ish. Panic at the Disco broke up earlier this year, 2023, year of our Lord. And obviously this is not new news, but we're going to look back a little bit at like the news that happened throughout the year, do a little bit of some reacts to some videos on their career, on Brendon Urie's career and all that. And talk a little bit about, what happened and our love for the band and our feelings toward the band and all the thoughts we have about it. So yeah, let's go ahead and we'll start off with just some news about the breakup itself.
Panic at the Disco vocalist Brendon Urie announced today after 19 years as a band, the group was breaking up. First formed as a Blink-182 cover band back in 2004, the group skyrocketed with their first single, I Write Sins, Not Tragedies, and they had various other hits over the years like 9 in the Afternoon. And he revealed in a statement that unfortunately the group would not be continuing. But sometimes a journey must end for a new one to begin. We've been trying to keep it to ourselves, though. Some of you may have heard, Sarah and I are expecting a baby very soon. The prospect of being a father and getting to watch my wife become a mother is both humbling and exciting. I look forward to this next adventure. That said, I'm going to bring this chapter of my life to an end and put my focus and energy on my family. And with that, Panic at the Disco will be no more.
I am having the hardest time with like this guy talking about Panic at the Disco, and it's just this heavy fucking sludgy metal in the background. It's like, yeah, Panic at the Disco, from High Hopes, and it's like, doom, doom. Like, okay, what is?
They found immense success with their first single, I Write Sins, Not Tragedies, and it reached number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. Its music video was named Video of the Year at the 2006 MTV VMAs. They've done 6 records, including their latest album, which came out in August. Brendon Urie was also the last original member of the band. Now, I'm not making any predictions here, but he's a pretty young guy, and their discography is pretty huge, and they have a pretty huge fan base. I'm going to go ahead and say there's a chance they still might perform in the future. I don't know if this is done yet. When you wrote a song as big and as iconic as I Write Sins, Not Tragedies, there's a strong likelihood they may get back together and perform at some point in the future if the money's right, and it probably would be.
This tweet here is basically what I think too. But yeah, so that's the news of them breaking up from earlier this year. Now, obviously, they did that European UK tour, which was their last shows. We thankfully got to see them twice.
Yeah.
It was in 2022, but we got to see them twice here in Chicago once and in Vegas during when we were young, 2022. And we got to see them at both of their last hometown show and their last US show.
Yeah, I think though something that was unexpected is the way that they had that set list, is that the entire new album was just played in the middle, sandwiched between all the singles. Like if you announce a breakup, I at least should get one last tour as a little treat. This was more abrupt, I feel, because usually we only see bands like say, all right, we're done, without like further predictions or anything like that. Like we see it happen when like something bad happens and then they're like, all right, we're done. We're shutting it down. No more. Goodbye.
I kind of get what you're saying, because I know we were talking a bit before about how like it did seem abrupt. It did seem like it was out of nowhere. And then all of a sudden, like there's this announcement that they're breaking up, but they still have this European UK tour that they're going to do. And obviously like those shows were announced and those shows were booked and there were tickets sold. So
and it wasn't billed as like, here's the farewell.
Right. I think that when we'll get into a little bit more conversation about Panic at the Disco and their legacy, I do think that there's a lot of different ways the conversation about this could go. I think they don't have to if they don't want to. If they're like, I really just don't want to do anything else. Like Brendon saying, I want to be a father. I want to be a husband. I want to be at home. I want to be here for my wife. And saying like, well, okay, well then do another show for all your fans. Like, nah, motherfucker. Like I have a kid coming. Like I'm going to be busy with that kid because he's not going to be like, oh, well, I'll come out another 9 months later after you do another tour for all the people. And this is kind of before, a big like one show or two show thing. There's a lot of options. There's a lot of things, but I think that from what it sounded like to me, it's like it was announced when it was announced and it was ending when it was ending, but it wasn't a thing of like, yeah, I don't really care how you perceive it because this is what's happening and I'm going to do it. And it does suck for us as fans. Maybe I think that, you and I have at least a little bit of like a privilege of having seen them twice in the year. I'm a gigantic Panic at the Disco fan. They're one of my favorite bands. I was stoked to see them, even if they are playing a full new record. And
you like the new record though.
The new record's not bad to me. It's not bad. It may not be for you.
It's still in line with all this stuff. I feel like that they've recently done.
It's
not that far off from it.
I think that everybody got really turned off for High Hopes and Pete Buttigieg. I think people got really turned off for that record because that song was everywhere. It was massive. Which is very good. Like you may not like it and you may get annoyed by it, but it's really good for a band like Panic at the Disco to have another single so far later where they're like, holy shit, like this song is popping off. And this is the same band that did that like all those years ago. I haven't thought about Panic at the Disco in years. So whatever. You may not like High Hopes. It may not be your favorite thing in the world. That's okay. I think at least like they were trying to do something a bit more like rock, Billy Joel, like that kind of vibe for the newer record, more like classic rock sort of sound. And I don't know why, but maybe I don't know why Fall Out Boy did Mania. So I guess in a way, like do whatever you want and make the music you want to make. And people who like it will come. People who won't like it won't. So obviously we are fans of this band from a long time. And we had an interview with Matt Squire back in the day, the producer on Fever You Can't Sweat Out. And obviously I had to ask him all these questions about Fever because that's one of that to me is a perfect record, top 10 record in my life. Like there are no skips on that. There's a firmly well-made, well-produced debut album from a bunch of like 17-year-olds. Their legacy for me, it's not going to change if they release an album that maybe isn't to the level of that or that I don't like as much. It's like, no, that's still the same band. Even if some of those guys have left, even if it's just Brendon, like it is still the same experience of listening to that band for me, hearing Brendon Urie's voice, seeing them live. Like I'm not feeling any different about the band just because Ryan Ross isn't in it, just because Spencer isn't in it. But I don't feel very different about seeing the band now and hearing I Write Sins, hearing 9 in the Afternoon, hearing anything off of Vice and Virtues. Like I don't feel different about the band. The idea that it's just one guy, the idea that it's just Brendon, I don't have any problem with that.
I mean, we've seen other bands who don't have their lead singer anymore, but can do, renditions that are really close to it, or they've created their own sound and like entirely. But I feel like for Panic, it's so unique that because you still have him as like the sole original member and he's still able to do what he can do, which I know we talked about before, where when we did see him, I felt like he was kind of overdoing it to prove that he can still hit those high notes.
No, he's performing.
He's performing.
Like you wouldn't go see Freddie Mercury and be like, I think he needs to tone it down.
I mean, like I will say it was a little bit more than when I previously saw him. But I mean, at that time there was people like on TikTok being like, he can't hit these notes. And I'm like watching him. I'm like, what do you mean? Yeah. He's doing it right there. But he was still doing his same performance. It was still a phenomenal show, especially with the production and backdrop that was on that tour.
I think everybody who was upset that it was just Brendon was a little bit overboard too. That's a little much. But I also think a lot of people thought that Brendon Urie was a bit egotistical, that he was kind of there were a lot of different things that came out on the internet. There's a lot of people in different places that were saying different things about him. As much as I'm going to say nice things about him, we did want to take a little look at some other people who may not agree with that and may have had other thoughts about Brendon Urie as an artist, and maybe argue a little bit with it and debate the idea. And maybe I can add some different things to this. So
I wish I could say I did not have a personal stake in this video, because unfortunately, Panic at the Disco is a very personal subject for me.
Can we talk about how
As
that
lame
one
as it
person
sounds-
is just standing there who's like, I just came here to be like a chaperone or to be with my homies, support them. They're like, I've made a terrible mistake.
this was during the era of like, you know, it's like, oh, you want to go see this band with me? And it's like, yeah, sure. It's like, what is going on?
I've done that over the last few years, and my friends are like, what the fuck is happening? What'd you take me to? And I'm like, well, here we are.
Here we are.
Here we
Sorry,
are.
I brought you to this show. It's like, what is a Panic out of? God damn it.
That band fundamentally changed my life. I remember when I first heard them. I was in elementary school when I Write Sins Not Tragedies came on the radio, and
Sorry. I also have to add that whenever anybody says, oh, I was in elementary school, like I was a kid, I was like, Panic at the Disco did not exist as a band until I was in college.
That's just wild to me.
Moving on.
And I remember in the 6th grade when I got an iPod Touch, I was able to check out the album that the song had come from, A Fever You Can't Sweat Out, and let me tell you, I was hooked. To this day, it's probably still my favorite album of all time. As we'll get into, Panic at the Disco has taken on a lot of different iterations over the years. It started as one thing and became something completely different. But at the center of it all is one man. One man who went from an emo heartthrob to a Vine star to a quirky Broadway lead with a Taylor Swift song credit under his belt to the internet's punching bag. After the success of Fever, we only got one more album with this core four. Their sophomore album was called Pretty Odd, and it definitely lives up to its title. As far of a departure from A Fever You Can't Sweat Out as you can possibly get. It's very cerebral, it's very heavily inspired by the music of the 60s, it sort of has a Beatles.
The Beatles. It's just the Beatles. It's
Yeah.
literally just the Beatles.
And it's definitely beloved by a lot of Panic fans, but not exactly by the band itself. The album only had one big commercially viable hit, which is 9 in the Afternoon, which I believe is also the first song of theirs that was featured on Guitar Hero or Rock Band, which led to this awkward interview, if I'm not mistaken.
I hate every song on Guitar Hero now.
Well, that's weird because we covered one on Guitar Hero, so
Yeah, well,
that's cool.
I hate it.
Liar.
Yeah, it's kind of a sensitive subject now.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
There's just been problems.
That was really awkward. Okay.
What?
The little neck massage to like,
But why is he
I
so
don't like
upset
that.
about Guitar Hero? Who cares? Again, I'm a massive fan of Panic at the Disco, and I think Pretty Odd. I don't care about the Beatles. I don't care about 60s music that much. I don't like a lot of that. Pretty Odd hits. Pretty Odd is, again, just an amazing record. Just great work all around. Like, I absolutely love that fucking record.
Anyway, Pretty Odd became a literal diverging point for the four members of the band. The band's guitarist and lyricist Ryan Ross and bassist John Walker wanted to go in this direction for their sound permanently, whereas drummer Spencer Smith and Brendon Urie didn't necessarily want to go back to their pop-punk roots with Fever, but rather wanted to find a different way to progress their sound forward.
I'm just going to say, Fever is not pop punk
no.
adjacent, but it is
That's
very like
cabaret rock,
theatrical
basically.
emo. It's like got all these different pieces that pop punk does not traditionally do. And what I always thought was like they did that record, which had so Fever is split in half. It has the first half is like very electronic focused, and the second half is very organic instrument focused with more string instruments and piano and all that. And so they were like, well, we want to continue doing something like that that's a bit more organic and more like live rock record as these like 60s and these sounds that has like this orchestration and stuff. It's very similar, but not the same as what we just did. Songs are slower. Songs are not as like in your face rock, lower tempos, etc. And then that being Pretty Odd. And then they're like, well, we have half the band wants to do the other shit. Half the band wants to do this new shit. Let's go diverge and do these two bands. And then when they did Vices and Virtues, it was very much like that electronic part that was the first half of Fever.
Yeah.
And that's why I was like, so yes, like, thank you. This is what I actually wanted more of.
They decided basically Pretty Odd was basically indie rock music at that time. That would have been fine if they went through it. I think they probably would have done pretty okay, but I don't think they would have hit the same success rate.
Young Veins did not do anything. I don't think people disliked Pretty Odd because it wasn't Fever. I think people disliked it because they're like, wait, I liked the sound of Fever though. So
Like, where is that?
I think like the songs are very good on Pretty Odd. I enjoy the song and the songwriting and the way it's all orchestrated and written together. That's good to me, but I can understand when a fan is like, no, I liked the fast tempo and the
silliness of it
yeah,
all.
the theatricality and like the electronics and this stuff that like no other band is really doing like this in this way. And you just took a lot of that stuff out. So if you're going to go back and do more of this, I don't care about it. But like what Ryan Ross brought to the band in his okay guitar playing and his lyrics, a lot of lyrics were also written by Pete Wentz. Let's make sure that that's clear. Pete Wentz helped write lyrics on Fever. That at the very least, like we're understanding that he did separate to go and bring that to the sound that maybe not a lot of their fandom loved. And they weren't going to like carry on and like follow that because they were like, I still like the old sound. And at least the name under Panic at the Disco is still doing something closer to that.
And so the band split. Ryan and John formed a side project called The Young Vanes, and Brendon and Spencer kept the Panic at the Disco moniker for their third album. Vices and Virtues was Panic's first venture as a duo. Spencer and Brendon headed up the project and recruited guitarist Ian Crawford and bassist Dallin Weeks for live touring performances. Vices is good. It definitely tries to build on the vibe of Fever, but instead of a circus freak show vibe, I get more of noir meets steampunk. There's songs I really love on it, like Let's Kill Tonight, Hurricane, Always,
Bangers.
and Nearly Witches, and songs I'm not as big a
Nearly Witches is one of their best songs,
so good.
period.
Can you believe that she just went through like part of the album? Like, yeah, no, all of it bangers.
She just hit banger after banger after banger. Yeah. Incredible.
The tour for Vices and Virtues ended in 2012, and Brendon, Spencer, and Dallin recorded the band's fourth studio album, Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die. But shortly after the project's recording, Spencer left the band due to health issues, leaving Brendon and Dallin as the only remaining members.
He left because he was an alcoholic.
I was about to just say that, and I'm like, that
It
means
is health issues, but
he addressed it publicly. He said he
Yes.
wanted to go and get treatment for his
because being on the
alcoholism.
road and like being in a band and constantly around all of this was hard for him to do, and so he wanted to step away from doing that. Let's be clear about why Spencer left for the purpose of how the internet fell out of love with Brendon Urie, because it's not Brendon's fault that Spencer left. We'll see if Kayla gets into that, but I trust Kayla. Kayla's doing great work.
And this is where the train starts to fall off the tracks just a little bit. While the trio recorded the project together, this was the first time the marketing and overall concept was very Brendon-centric, which is evident by the album art where he is the only one present. I like most of this album, although I feel like parts of it are a little unfocused, and it definitely marks a transition in terms of their sound where electronic production is more of the dominant aesthetic here.
This was when Panic also started doing more like lower tempo stuff again. All the songs that she mentioned from Vices and Virtues were a little bit more high tempo and high theatricality. And she's right. They're definitely moving towards more of a pop sound, a more like mainstream sound. And this is definitely the era where everybody was bringing tempos down and songs were a little bit more like, which you saw Fall Out Boy do it.
I did. I'll always see Fall Out Boy do whatever.
It definitely changed like the emo sound into more the mainstream sound. There were a lot of other bands, especially on Fueled by Ramen, that were doing this, and I always talk about how like this era is like that down era for a lot of Fueled by Ramen
I feel
bands.
like this is where the point where people started to also be like your sellouts to like any
Yes.
band that was getting big because they were like, we're gonna become stadium rock or like
you're not playing Warped
mainstream
Tour
rock
anymore. You're too big for Warped Tour
right?
now.
But it's like, wasn't that all what all these bands kind of wanted to get into?
No,
To make money?
The bands want to. The fans don't want them to. The fans want to be like, I can still see them on Warped Tour. Oh, I don't want to get too popular. No, they're my band. They belong to me. Small mindset thinking, you know.
And it's probably some of their most commercially viable music up until this point in time. The band had also gone through many transitions with its actual members, that for the first time there were a couple of mumbles of like, why doesn't Brendon Urie just go solo? Although that criticism didn't really pick up until a little later on. It's also worth noting that around this time Brendon himself was rather beloved and adored by fans, some of which weren't all that familiar with the older days of Panic. Many people became aware of him for two reasons during this particular stretch of his career. One, because This Is Gospel became a really big hit. It's a song I really love and most people tend to really enjoy, and it had two pretty viral music videos which, you know, added to its reach.
The fucking piano version of it
That
is
was good.
insane.
The other was because Brendon Urie, like a lot of celebrities at this point around 2013, ended up joining Vine.
He had a lot of really good vines. Dude, I've watched some compilations and I'm like, holy shit, dude's funny.
Carried into the band's next album, Death of a Bachelor, but by this point, there was definitely quite a bit of speculation as to when Brendon Urie would drop the delusion that he was still in a band, especially because it seemed pretty definite that Spencer wasn't going to return, plus Dallin reverted to being just a touring member rather than a more prominent creative force actually making the music. My biggest guess as to why Death of a Bachelor wasn't a solo project was because Panic! At the Disco had gone through so many changes in terms of members, aesthetic, and style that it didn't necessarily matter who was in the band.
Yes.
Yeah. Bringing up how Too Rare to Live had different, more Brendon-centric marketing, that's probably also from the label.
Yeah.
After a certain point, like, artists do have some input, but when you're on a major label like Panic is on, you don't get as many free creative choices anymore because they're giving you a shit ton of money.
Yes.
That's how it works.
Homie, no one's going to go, oh, I love this new Brendon Urie single. Who's Brendon Urie? Oh, Panic! At the Disco.
Yeah. I mean, if people already associate Brendon Urie with Panic, there's like there's no marketing reason to divert.
Who is in Panic! At the Disco?
Yeah.
Who's in Matchbox 20?
Rob Thomas.
Yeah. Rob Thomas had a solo record.
Honestly,
does anybody go,
but
"Oh,
I didn't
Rob
even know Rob
Thomas?"
Thomas was in Matchbox 20 until this year.
Exactly, and that's because of me. It is very hard for you as an artist in a band to make your name now all of a sudden a household name in the same way your band is. No one's going to go, oh, I love this new Gerard Way single, except for people who are like, oh, I loved My Chemical Romance. And Gerard Way had a solo career too. He put out his own shit, but everybody who was coming there either knew that he was in My Chemical Romance, and very few people probably were like, oh, this is that Gerard Way guy. I don't know what else he's ever done. This is a brand new artist. Where's
also
he from?
the same thing happened with Patrick Stump when he did Soul Punk.
Yes.
People would still go to his shows and say, play Fall Out Boy.
Yes. In the end, Panic! At the Disco has been a band and has had such a career that has created these hit songs and under that name that the idea of just saying, oh, let's forget that name and just let it go because it should just be Brendon Urie as a solo artist. Like, why? You're basically saying, I don't want the fucking money anymore.
Yeah.
And no one's going to say that. So honestly, get over it. Just get over it. Oh, it's really just him and all these other people are touring musicians. Yeah, get over it. It doesn't fucking matter because the songs matter and the music matters and the show itself matters. And so if you're just like, yeah, I recognize the one guy, but I don't recognize anybody else, that's fine. Just shut up and sing, man. I'm kidding. It literally comes down to you will do better monetarily and marketing wise if you stay with the same name you've had for the entire time. Period.
Yeah.
End of discussion.
Also, too, again, legal contracts. If it takes more money to buy it out than you would staying with it and making it, that could also be something that people attribute it to.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. If Brendon Urie did say, I'm not going to use Panic! At the Disco anymore, it's just going to be a solo project, they're like, cool, then you can't play any Panic! At the Disco song about. Like, yeah, okay.
Because they own.
That'd be dumb as fuck.
We don't know who owns his masters fully. Most people.
Most likely the
we
label
don't know,
does.
but most likely they probably own
yeah.
most of it, if not all of it.
Yeah. So if Brendon Urie says, yeah, I'm not doing it under this name, there's always a chance that like then you cannot play the songs of that. So yeah, that'd be great. Oh, I really wish he just did a solo project because this doesn't seem like it's anybody else but him. Anyway, I went to the Brendon Urie show and they didn't play All Right Sin, so, great.
And going solo is a big career move. Maybe he just thought it would be a more profitable venture to stick with the same name and branding. And
yes.
Despite all odds, it kind of worked.
Thank you, Kayla, for saying that in a very short way when we said it in a long way.
Because Death of a Bachelor is a pretty solid album. Certainly better than Too Weird to Live, Too Rare to Die, in my opinion, and probably
True.
the last of Panic's albums that are definitely good. Sure, some of it is a little corny, some of it doesn't sound like old Panic, whatever that means, but all of that melts away when you consider the sheer magnitude of how much the song LA Devotee fucked.
You're right.
Yeah, you're right.
And while Panic keeps chugging out albums with various levels of identity crises, Brendon himself is becoming a bigger and bigger star. He performed at the Kennedy Center Honors for Billy Joel. He wrote music for SpongeBob the Musical. In 2017, it was announced that he would star in Cyndi Lauper's Tony Award-winning Broadway musical Kinky Boots, where he played one of the lead roles, Charlie Price. And in 2019, he was featured on Taylor Swift's Worst Song.
That was a terrible song. I listened to it, I'm like, what the fuck is this?
But I'm happy that they did it.
He was all of a sudden a pretty palatable and successful star himself, with a solo act masquerading as a band. And despite all potential inclination not to do so, he continued performing as Panic at the Disco through the later part of the decade. And I mean, I guess he had no reason to not continue doing this because it hadn't harmed him in any way commercially. He was putting out music and people were still listening to it.
A bunch of people on Twitter and a bunch of people who have been fans for all these years are not thinking the same way that somebody who just hears it on the radio and wants to go to the show is. Like, no one gives a shit. This is like inside baseball shit. Like, I'm looking at stats, I'm looking at this. It's like, dude, some idiot is just hearing a song and goes, oh, I really like High Hopes, I'm gonna go to the show. And that's their entire decision making. And that's the majority of the people that are buying the tickets. In the end, the majority of people that are at the show are not the core fans, nor are they people who have followed everything and have opinions and are on the forums and are in tweets and all this shit. They're not paying attention to it. So like the idea that you're like, oh, well, you know, we're all talking about this and the internet is alive with this argument. It's like, no one cares.
No, I mean,
but in the music industry, all it takes is one slip-up. One critical misstep that gives everyone an excuse to label you as cringe and say they had a bad feeling about you all along. And for Brendon Urie, the worst was yet to come. In 2018, Panic at the Disco released an album called Pray for the Wicked.
I like Pray for the Wicked.
I like Pray
I'm
for the
gonna be
Wicked
honest,
too.
I don't think I've ever gotten fully through this album. I didn't like what I heard of it very much. But one of
Re-listen
the
to it.
songs in that project, called High Hopes, got picked up by the campaign of then presidential hopeful Pete Buttigieg, the least cool presidential candidate that could possibly pick up your.
There's a lot of other worse,
Pete
cool
Buttigieg is not
other
great.
one. He's not great. He wasn't. There's others who are not as cool for sure, though, by comparison.
It doesn't help. It's not great.
No.
Song. And on top of that, they created an incredibly cringy dance for his staffers to perform while on the campaign trail. But the virality of High Hopes really put a spotlight on what the most hardcore Panic fans have known for a long time. This is not a band anymore. This was Brendon Urie putting out mediocre, cookie-cutter, elevator music, so generic that a Democratic presidential candidate can find a way to make it even less cool, a feat so dramatic when you consider that this is what their music used to sound like.
I hear you, Kayla. I hear you.
Pray for the Wicked's really good. King of the Clouds is really good.
King of the Clouds is a very good song. I hear you. I don't think we can blame. I don't think he was in the studio cooking in the stew thinking like, God, I just really hope that a presidential candidate picks this up. I do think it's a little chicken or the egg argument to say that because Pete Buttigieg picked it up, the song sucks. Like,
I feel like it's just because it got overplayed.
Yes.
No, I want to like, I know what's on this album. I've listened to it, but now I'm like questioning myself. Like, do I actually?
Fuck a Silver Lining.
Oh, that one fucking
That song fucks.
goes.
The song Old Fashioned's on there. I like that
Roaring
one.
Twenties was really
Roaring
good.
20s. I
One
liked.
of the Drunks, that was actually a good one.
Yeah.
Dying in LA was a good one. Oh,
like
okay,
Dying in LA.
this all fucks.
Yeah, I know,
What
it's
do
a
you
good record.
mean? I'm looking at all of this.
It's good. Sorry.
I can understand skipping High Hopes because sometimes I'll come on like a playlist and I'm like, meh. The rest though, fucks.
If you let's say for the sake of argument here that you had to write High Hopes to make everyone listen to all the rest of those. So it's like, yeah, we got to do this one because we sell out a bunch of tickets, but it also lets us make all the other songs on the record that also fuck.
Yeah.
So like I heard High Hopes at the beginning and I was like, yeah, this is like a really like straightforward pop hit, like whatever. And then it got on the radio and I'm like, okay, this is doing numbers. But like literally, if you look at it from like most moms in the suburbs, they're like Panic at the Disco had 2 hits, period. So when we all look at this as like they have many songs that we love, most people are like, yeah, they're a 2-hit wonder. They did I Write Sins, and then many years later they did High Hopes, and it was massive for them.
In 2020, once High Hopes Gate had
Sorry.
High Hopes Gate?
I have to do it just because I saw Pete once. Hey, Peter.
kind of dissipated, Breezy Weeks, wife of former Panic at the Disco bass player Dallin Weeks, accused the band's bodyguard Zach Hall of sexual harassment. Following this revelation, a number of users on Twitter began to accuse Brendon himself of a similar kind of harassment, although it's worth noting that a number of these accusations were made in tweets that have since been deleted. Around this time, a clip also surfaced of Brendon giving some questionable stage banter, and definitely in the earlier times that I've seen Panic live, this was pretty much par for the course in every show.
If I see you after the show, I'm gonna fuck you.
every single person at that time made a joke like that.
I was about to say, it's not okay, but it was a product of the time.
Everyone has learned to look back and say, I can't believe that this person in their process of learning wasn't already doing what I believe that they should be doing. I'm going to be mad at them now. If he was on stage today and he said that, yeah, okay, hey man, you haven't learned, but you're not interested in the learning. You're interested in the result. And you're like, you need to stop because you said something bad before. So the work is being done. It's done. Don't look back. Look at what they're doing today. And also look at the culture that creates the environment when those things are jokes. It's fine. I'm not getting into fucking...
Don't get into cancel culture right now.
Well, I mean, that's what's going to happen here is like we're talking about cancel culture with Brendon Urie. And I know a lot of people who have not looked into a lot of this shit. And like, we don't, we talk about this all the time, but we don't really buy into this fucking internet cancel culture bullshit because it's just people who are outraged on the internet trying to look like they're on the right side of history with all this shit. And so a lot of people just hear those people say things and they go, oh, well, that's crazy. Like that must be true. That must be accurate. And it's like, if you're going to use journalism on this, it's like, well, that is journalism. You still have to have all these certain points met before you can say yes, without then there's a crime that happened and needs to go to trial and we have official reporting. When this stuff all came out, I looked it up and like a year later, months later, like there are no articles written by any reputable source. There are only people who just picked up on Twitter drama and posted it, which is essentially just an op-ed for shit they read on Twitter. There's straight up no writer in the world who's going to turn down the story of the High Hopes guy and being accused of sexual assault at the height of Me Too, period. No one's going to do that.
Another controversial moment, Urie made a comment saying, quote, I wish I was born black so I could wear the clothes that I wear without getting made fun of. He is also seen mouthing the N-word in an old Vine. He also reportedly said a transphobic slur, which he later apologized for. Brendon also eventually did fire the security guard that was accused of this harassment, but it seems that Dallin Weeks still harbors some hard feelings, changing the caption of an old photo on Instagram of his hand after an airsoft injury to #TBT when I got shot with an airsoft gun on stage in the middle of playing a song, and I had to pretend it was funny so that I could keep my job. Brendon had initially commented on that same photo when it was posted, saying, got you good.
A lot of people have gone hard for Ryan Ross and have gone hard for Dallin Weeks.
Yeah.
In the breakup. And like, I don't know either of these people, Brendon or Dallin, to say what that interaction was, why he changed it.
There's been so much lore and rumors and even honestly fanfare just thrown into it over the years that
Fanfic, you mean? Or
I almost said fanfic because
I think
that's
a
what
little
it
bit
was.
of fanfic too.
Yeah. I feel like I missed a bunch, but every time I see people even nowadays like on Stan Twitter for like Dallin Wanks or
Dallin Wanks.
Weeks or really any of that like lore, I'm like, I don't know what to interpret.
No idea. I could read this the same way and go, okay, why did Dallin feel it necessary to change the caption of this so long after the original post was made and when he's no longer in it? And I am very mindful of the fact that like his wife was the accuser, the person who was sexually assaulted by the security guard, and the security guard was fired. And I can absolutely understand that, you know, Dallin Weeks is not going to forgive anybody.
Oh
in
yeah,
the case.
of course.
And he is more than welcome to believe whatever he wants, because I don't know, and I'm going to trust that everybody's doing the best that they can with what they have. So fine. I don't see how changing the caption changes anything. I don't see how anybody reading into it is helpful. I think it's just very like it's drama bait, and I think it's just being a little bit of like spicy on the internet for a little bit of attention. And that's what I don't really dig it.
So Brendon is the closest to cancellation that he has ever gotten, but the story doesn't end there. Still under the name Panic at the Disco for some godforsaken reason.
We know why.
I know, I'm just going to let it keep going, but god damn it, stop bringing it up, Kayla. Stop bringing it up. It's not going to happen. You're not going to make it happen.
He releases the band's final album for now, Viva Las Vengeance. Now, this is also an album that I haven't been able to bring myself to listen to all the way through, mostly because it's bad, but also as a hardcore former Panic fan in their glory days, it just makes me really depressed. So basically, all of Viva Las Vengeance got panned by critics, and it was clear that Brendon needed a break. I mean, he pretty much did a tour for every single Panic album that has been released, and that can obviously get very, draining in a lot of ways, both mentally and on your voice. Brendon went kind of quiet after all of these allegations came to light and also the poor reception to Viva Las Vengeance, and then in January of 2023, he posted on Instagram that the emo pop band that began in 2004, Panic at the Disco, was ending its run after 7 albums and nearly 2 decades of making music. But by the time this announcement came around, it didn't feel like it was the same band at all. I mean, obviously it wasn't. The only constant throughout these 2 decades was Brendon, which is impressive in its own right, but at the same time, I can't help but feel like something that started out really special became washed out and corporate and broken and tainted, just like everything else. And I'm kind of tired of that happening. I hate when a good thing exists.
Sorry. You bet.
The reality of a lot of things is that with these bigger bands that will happen, that's why you keep looking for newer up and coming artists so you can still have a lot of that like excitement for those bands and also just find like new awesome music.
Exists and everyone enjoys it and derives some kind of really important meaning out of it for themselves, and then it just gets ruined by external forces of evil or capitalism or whatever. It just kind of sucks. Ultimately, I am still grateful for Panic at the Disco's existence. I hold Fever as an album in my heart quite fondly, and I probably always will. I hope Ryan Ross is doing well, and I hope most of all that now you understand why the internet fell out of love with Brendon Urie. See what I did there? I said the thing.
The point of the video was to see why the internet fell out of love, which obviously we're putting this on the internet, so you know it's got to be there. Good job by Kayla. Kayla says on YouTube, drop a like, drop a follow, drop a subscription. Anyway, yeah. So we just wanted to give a little bit of time. We did not talk about Panic at the Disco very much this year at all with the breakup and all that. And now that the year is ending and we're all looking back at our year and all that, I wanted to give a little in memoriam from the Emo Social Club here to one of our largest emo bands of all time. So personally for me, thank you Panic at the Disco for existing and doing the shit. See you in 2026 at When We Were Young Fest when they drop all the money to get the original lineup back, and I know they'll do it.